And welcome into the New England Hockey Journal's RinkWise podcast. I am your host, Evan Maranofsky. Unfortunately, no Patrick Donnelly today. Pat is not here. He had prior commitments. I don't know if he doesn't like us or something. I don't know what the deal is with that. But you know who does like us? The new head coach for the Cushing Boys team. That's Dan Fontas. He is here with me today. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here with you, Evan. I do love you guys. I read a lot of your stories. I follow you guys. So that is a fact. But no, really excited to be here. Excited to dive in all things prep school hockey and just kind of, talk about everything that's going on right now in the hockey world.
Well, you're flattering, Dan. I appreciate the kind words. For those who don't know, a lot of times when there are new prep coaches, I'll shoot them a text, say, hey, we'll do a story. I'll call them, whatever. Typically me. Then you meet a bunch of months later, at the rinks, run into each other, whatever. Dan and I met on a flight to Buffalo. Dan was fine. The best part was we were on, I think you were behind me. I turned around and we both were like, oh, geez, hey, what's up? And I went to sit down and the person next to me was like, he looks at Dan and says, do you want to sit next to your son? And like, whoa, like, all right, that got pretty crazy pretty quick. So that is how Dan and I met. Someone thought that I was his son. Meanwhile, his actual son was right there. So it wasn't me. So, but we made it to Buffalo, and it was a great bunch of days of watching hockey nonstop, which I assume is what you've been doing a lot of since you got promoted.
Yeah. I mean, I think that time of the year is great to get out and to watch, right? Like, cause you got the national camp and then you got the regional camps going on. You've got the opportunity to see a lot of these different prep camps and college camps and stuff and kind of get interactive with kids on the ice at some of those camps as well. So I would say once you get to like mid-June to mid-August, it's a pretty heavy recruiting opportunity because that's when you can kind of get out and see a lot of kids that are local, but also a lot of kids that are kind of traveling from afar that are participating in different events and showcases and stuff. So I've been out there, hitting the pavement hard for sure and making sure that we're bringing in the next crop of Cushing Penguins.
And, you got promoted, and it's interesting because a lot of times, when someone gets promoted or whatever, they're coming from a new organization, they're coming from a new area. You've been with Cushing since 2021, I believe. You were the head coach with the Varsity B team, which I want to ask you about that experience. And you were the assistant last season under Ryan Bork. And I'm curious, as getting promoted to head coach, what were the big changes so far? What's been different? What's stayed the same? I'm curious sort of the last couple months for you.
To be honest with you, there hasn't been many big changes. I think, I've been so involved with this program since I've been here. When Paul Pearl came in a few years ago before Ryan, he brought me in to help coach with him and help run the program and run the Varsity B team. So I've been by his side, every day. And then when Ryan got the head job, just the year before this past, right? I was side by side with him every day. So I've been able to know the kids on a day-to-day basis. I've been involved in the recruiting. I'm also an admissions officer for Cushing Academy. So it allows me to kind of interact with the families through the whole application process as well. So the biggest changes I would say now is the final decision just ends with me, right? In terms of what we want to do in terms of the hockey program. And where Ryan and I, particularly last year, I kind of felt like, we were running the team and the program together. Now it's kind of just probably a little bit more me having to make those final decisions right now, right? Until I kind of get, a little bit more comfortable with my new staff. So not many big changes, trying to obviously help our players, elevate and move on to the next level. Right. That's probably something that I'm going to be a lot more involved in, as opposed from before where that wasn't really falling on my shoulders. So making sure we're getting them to the right junior programs and the right college programs, et cetera, things like that. So, so I've been in it for a while. Right. And Cushing has been a big part of my life for a long time, as a former player here. And obviously as a coach for the past 5 years within the program, I know what to expect.
And it's funny, like you mentioned, hitting the pavement, recruiting players, be it, local kids or kids from outside the region, kids from afar. Is it tougher now with the CHL ruling, with sort of how the landscape's changing? You know this, but I'm curious, like if it's difficult, if there are new challenges that have come with that.
I don't think so. At least not yet. Right. I mean, let's be honest. Like, we were always losing our top end players.
Hmm.
We're always losing that one or two kids that are going to the USHL or the DCHL. Right now, that one or two kids, they just may have a different opportunity to go to the Quebec Major Junior League, OHL, WHL, or something like that. Right. So I think that that was never going to change, losing your potential best prospects or your best players that within your system. You know, yes, with the CHL rule changes, does it allow for more American born players to go play in those Canadian major junior leagues? 100%. Right. But the player pool is still the same. Right. So I haven't seen an impact with us yet. We lost two players this past year. Tommy Blyle, who left, decided to leave early to go to play in Newfoundland. And, our goalie, Max Korovic, who decided to go play in the OHL. I think we were going to lose those guys regardless. They probably would have just been in the USHL if it wasn't the OHL. Right. So, um, you know, I'm pretty confident right now. Don't think things are going to change drastically. Um, could prep get a little bit younger in the future years? Maybe you see a few more kids that are competing as freshmen that you may not have seen in previous years, just because there's a few more open up, spots for those kids to be a little bit more impactful.
That's an interesting way to look at it, because it's funny. I was before we got on this, before we started recording this, and this will be out by the time you guys are listening to this. How
Yep.
many, what locals made their QMJHL rosters, and I was
Yep.
looking through, and I'm like, all right, that kid graduated prep, that kid graduated prep, that kid graduated prep.
Yep.
Oh, there aren't that many
Yep.
kids that didn't, that were sort of unexpected, so to speak. And it's interesting because I think the perception for a long time was that more kids were going to go, but I think you're right that it's the same group just going to different places, and that's
Yep.
worse for the USHL teams because a Tommy Blyle is now going to play for Moncton rather than Dubuque, at least to
Yep.
start the season. And I think you're right. Like, it is interesting to see how I think so far, and again, we're 16 days into September. Like things,
Yep.
maybe things change, but it doesn't look like it hit prep that hard. I would be curious though, with recruits, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Every kid has big eyes and big
Yeah.
dreams and thinks that maybe that they can go play in the Q or the OHL
Yeah.
at 16, which sometimes isn't
And
feasible.
and it may, maybe less Canadian born hockey players don't come to prep as much too now, because they can stay home and they can play in those leagues and then come to college. Right. But if those kids end up staying home, then there's limited spots for the American players to go. Right.
Yep.
So now, again, the player pool is not changing. It's just how are we going to restructure where kids are playing, and I just, I'm not worried about it personally, because there's a lot of good hockey players out there. And there's kids coming from all over the world now that are good hockey players that are looking to excel at the next levels. And if you're willing to go out and recruit and you're willing to put your brand and your hockey programs out there, fortunately, I think Cushing has a great brand. Right? I put us up there as one of the top high school hockey programs in the country. And I believe that. And so I'm confident that we're going to be able to continue to bring in, high end talent to compete, in a very highly competitive prep world.
So you were the varsity B head coach for 2 years, and I'm always curious because I know Ryan Bork used to say that your varsity B program was really good. Paul Pearl
Yeah.
had said that before him, that it was always really good, and
Yep.
oftentimes the focus is on the main varsity team, as it usually
Yep.
is. And there are lots of options for kids out there. If you're on
Yeah.
Cushing's varsity B team, could you go play at a different prep school and be on their varsity team? Maybe. And I always
Yeah.
wonder about that. How did you manage developing those varsity B players? Because there were varsity B players on your varsity team last year that won that won everything.
Yep.
Um, how did you go about coaching that team and getting kids to buy into, hey, you can be on the real varsity team soon enough?
So And it's not like, I think, like, selling them something that, may not be there, right?
Yep.
Like, at the end of the day, I believe as a coach, it's just living in the moment, and having a kid understand to just be the best version of themselves every single day. And if you as an athlete, right, if you're doing the right things, you're eating the right way, you're recovering the right way, you're working out the right way, all that stuff that it takes to be a good hockey player, then you're doing academics, you're taking care of your academics and your social life and all that balance, good things are going to happen for you. Right. And I think for me, more at the varsity B level, it was about giving them the same experience as close as I could of what our varsity A was doing. Right. I was involved with Paul at that time. Right. I went into the varsity A practice. I wanted my players to see that, okay, there's a connection there between the two teams, and then we're not separate. We're a program. Right. So that's something that I think I just really wanted to instill in the varsity B player at that time, is that, hey, we're one, right? And we're going to play the same structure that we're playing with our top varsity team. So if you get a call up, right, for practice or for games, whatever it may be, you're sliding right in and you understand the structure. So those kids are now more confident, right? And there's a little bit more believability from them as well. So I think that was a lot of it, is just trying to keep the same structure so they know that when they did move up, nothing was really going to be different. But then also showing them that I was part of both teams. I think that was very important for as well, because then they see that and they're like, okay, well, coach, he has a voice on that team as well, right? And that's important. And that's what we want to continue to strive, right? So we just hired a new varsity B coach this year, Jamie Prince, who's coming from Nichols School out of Buffalo. He had been there for the past 16 years. And before that, he was at Bridgeton Academy. I feel that with him now running our varsity B team, we're going to have that same thing. He cares. He's a heck of a hockey coach. He's been in it for a long time, and he's going to develop the varsity B players, right? So our goal is to move kids up, no doubt. And you just mentioned it before. There was quite a few kids on our team last year that won the championship. There were 7 of them. 7 kids the previous year that played varsity B hockey that were part of our championship hockey team up here. Um, Probably a little bit of an anomaly. That's you probably won't see 7 every year. That's a lot. But that is what it was that year. And look what we were able to do.
And it's showing that kids can move up. And I think that's a huge North Star for kids. And I'm curious, like you have a son who's a 2010, right?
2011.
2011. And so you're going through it with him where, you see kind of the shifting landscape and
Yep.
and things like that. Do you notice kids? I notice it from afar, and sometimes, one story can feel like a lot of kids. So
Yeah.
your perception kind of gets screwed up there. But like, do you see more kids wanting to jump to somewhere for a better opportunity? Like, because clearly, like Varsity B, you at Cushing, you can go there, you can play, you can have a great experience, and move up to varsity if you're good enough at some point. I feel like sometimes though that mindset gets a little bit lost. Do you notice that with kids coming up that happens?
Yeah, it happens. I mean, right. I'm not going to sit here and say that it doesn't. We've had kids come, as freshmen and sophomore, and they may not see, like, and might just not get there. And yeah, they've gone to different prep schools and then may go play varsity hockey at a different prep school.
Mhm.
Maybe we were a good development path for them for a couple of years, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can look at that as an opportunity as well. I've seen kids come to Cushing Academy and play 4 years of varsity B hockey and just never get that crack at the top team. And guess where they're playing now? NCDC, North American Hockey League. They still have the ability to move on. You know, for me, it's about giving them the whole experience, right? The high school experience to go along with the hockey development. And kids just need to kind of know and be patient with the process, right? As well. So, do I see kids move on at times? 100%. But I also see a lot of kids stay here and develop through the program as well. Because that team plays a really good schedule. Like, we go and play Bridgeton Academy's varsity. We play Rice Prep. We're playing, New Hampshire Bishop Girton varsity hockey teams, Massachusetts public varsity MIA teams. We're playing Academy St. Louis varsity team this year, right? So we're giving them a good enough schedule where they're staying competitive and allowing them to, create development through that environment as well. And they're also playing fall hockey as well at the 18th tier two level, for most of them, right? So they're getting the same thing. It's just being patient when they're.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to get into your own career. I want to get into your path up. You're from Acton. I assume prior to Cushing, you played at Acton Boxborough. Am I correct?
I did my freshman, sophomore year. Yep.
Freshman and sophomore year, and then you went to
Yep.
Cushing for junior and senior year?
Correct. Yep. And then I went right to Lowell from there, which, you don't really do that much more. So
And that was and again, that was back in the late 90s, so not too long ago. 2 years at AB, 2 years at Cushing. You see that now with kids. 2 years in the MIAA, 2 years in
yep.
prep, or 3 years in the MIAA or whatever. And
Yep.
I'm curious your own path. Like, what what was what was MIA hockey like back in the late 90s, and how did that improve? How did
Uh,
that get you ready for prep?
it was good. I mean, I mean, obviously, if you go back even to the 80s, obviously, right, and into the mid 90s, late 90s, I think it started to tail off a little bit afterwards in the early 2000s, and you started to see a shift because there was more junior team, more midget opportunities started to pop up in our area, particularly. But in the mid 90s, I mean, you go back and look at some of the rosters, even some of the kids on my Acton Boxborough team. I think we have 4 D1 kids on our team alone from public high school, right? Maybe 5, throughout, right? So it was really good. It was competitive. We played a pretty strong schedule back then against the, we're the dual county league, I think it was back then. And then it very shortly after switched to the NBC DCL at that time. And I think it's even changed a little bit more now. But the competition was really good. And then when you got, into the playoff hockey, obviously that was even better. And my freshman, sophomore year was very fortunate to be a part of 2 Super 8 teams back then. That's kind of when it started, is in the mid 90s time frame, early 90s time frame. So we were pretty competitive, and, we were able to compete each other in practice and all that stuff to make sure that we're, developing that way as well. So I had nothing but a great experience with the MIA at that time.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That was like only 15 years after Tom Barrasso was like the guy at AB in net,
Yeah.
left, went, was it to the Buffalo Sabres?
Buffalo Sabres at the time. Yep.
Won the Rookie of the Year and the Vezina in like his first year, just one
Yeah.
year after being
Back
a
in
starter at
Boxborough.
AB. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, Dan, I'll tell you this off camera. I have a project coming that incorporates a lot of this stuff that I've been working
Yeah.
on for a couple of years. So I'll tell you after, because I think you'll be
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah.
It's a tease for people listening that there is something big coming in the next couple months regarding the
Yeah.
MIAA. And then you coached at AB from
Yep.
03 to 08, right?
Yep.
And how did you see Mass high school hockey change during that time? If you saw it change at all during that time?
Um, so I was really young coaching them, and I've kind of looked back now. It's like, geez, why'd they hire me? I was like 24 years old,
Say
and
that's
I'm
over
like,
20 years ago now, and you're a young guy.
it was, and I'm 46 now, right? So I was young back then, and I mean, 24
Nice.
year old coach, 23-year-old coach, and you got 18-year-old high school kids. That time for me was pretty special, right? And I think MIAA was still very competitive. It's still competitive now. I don't want
Yeah.
to take that away. There's
Yes.
a lot of really good hockey players that compete and play at the MIAA level. But I think back then it was still okay to like stay there for 3 or 4 years, right? Like you had a lot of good teams. And I think um, you know, you also have to have someone that's leading those teams that I think is kids are willing to believe in as well, right? Like, so as a young coach, excuse me, I had just gone through it, right? I had just got done with my playing career. I was involved in the hockey world. I was relatable to them at that time, right? So for me to get them to buy in as a young coach, and for us to find success, because we were able to get back to the Super 8 in my 3rd year of coaching it was just a really good experience in that regard. So but the competition was good then. I mean, I go back and I look at some of the kids that we coached against when we were playing the Malden Catholics of the world and the Austin Preps of the world. And, they had a lot of good hockey players back.
How did you know? So you graduate, you finish up playing at UMass Lowell in 2002. You begin coaching AB in 2003. How did you know you wanted to be a coach, and how did that job open up at AB that you were at 22 years old, 23 years old, being like, I
Yeah.
want this job?
So when I graduated Lowell 2002, I was planning on going playing the minor pro leagues, just like most college kids do, right? They're like, I want to go try to play pro. I signed a contract in the CHL with the Indianapolis Ice. And I went out there. I was out there for probably about a month. And I remember this. It was at that time, it was what, like end of September, early October timeframe. Was stretching. I remember it. I was stretching in the rink and I looked up and and we're in auditorium and I'm like, I don't know if this is for me. Right. Like I don't know if the minor hockey league gamut was for me. So I had an opportunity that was kind of presented where it was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and get in the hockey world and I'm going to start coaching. And I just did it. I just kind of took that leap of faith and I knew I didn't want to leave the game because I loved the game. But I also knew in my playing experiences, I was always a pretty good leader and I had the ability to kind of bring teams together as a captain to help our teams be successful, right? And be that kind of extension of a voice of my coaches at that. So I kind of just felt like I had it in me. So I went back and I started volunteering at UMass Lowell. I started teaching camps clinic with my uncle who owns and operates a company called Hockey Academy. And then I started to volunteer with Acton Boxborough that year. So I was just doing anything that I could just to keep my hands in it. Then Coach Ottinger, who was the head coach at Acton Boxborough at that time, had said that this was his last year of coaching, and it just gave me an opportunity to just take a chance. And I put my name out there. I was 24 at that time, turning 24, and I was an alum, obviously, at Acton, and so there was a lot of I think good mojo around that, like a former player, a Division I college hockey player, coming back, being a part of it, and they took a chance on me, and I'm very thankful for that time of my coaching career because it allowed me to be a young coach in a good hockey program in a good town with a lot of history that allowed me to kind of take some chances, make some mistakes, and kind of learn as a young guy.
It's an incredible, and the part about relatability I think is so big because you were not that much older than your players. Like you were
No,
not at that
no,
time. Like at most you were 10 years older than a freshman. That's not a
yeah,
heck of a lot. And so it's the relatability. It's I just went through a lot of this. I can
yeah,
relate to you in that sense. But I am curious, like in terms of implementing systems, in terms of stuff off the ice. Like you had just you had just came from playing Division I hockey, and
yeah.
then before that, the MIAA and Cushing. Who are coaches that you drew on from your past that you kind of implemented into your own style at such a young age?
I mean, and I can coach against him now at KUA, but Timmy Whitehead was, I mean, one of my favorite coaches of all time. I mean, what an extraordinary human being. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, he's just a genuine person. He cares about his players, right? He was able to, put structure in place, obviously, and, X's and O's, but away from the rink, like he was so impactful in so many of his players' careers because he cared and he showed that he cared. So that was really important for me with my 3 years as a player under his eye at UMass Lowell, right? I think that sometimes at this age for high school kids, it can be more important than the X's and the O's, right? We have a lot of good hockey players at Cushing, right? So they make me, and hopefully they're going to continue to make me look like a good coach because hopefully we continue to win a lot of hockey games and put ourselves in great opportunities to, continue to win championships. But it's forming the relationships with those players away from the rink that allows us to kind of come together as a family. Let's just say it, right? Like we're around each other so much. And I learned a lot of that from, Coach Whitehead. He did a fantastic job of bringing kids together and teams together. Um, I had one year that I was able to learn from Blaze McDonald as well as a player. Blaze, who's currently the head coach at Colby College, he was really impactful as well because he was really, I don't want to say like robotic, but he wanted us to play certain ways, right? So that accountability piece was something that I really learned from him as well, of making sure that, hey, if we're gonna be successful, we all have to be predictable to each other, right? So that was really impactful for me. Those two guys for sure at that time. And then, Coach Jacobs as well at Cushing Academy, right? He's a guy that was definitely a player's coach. He let you, he wanted it to be fun for you, right? And just kind of like go out there and have fun and just play. You're a good hockey player, right? Like the other stuff's going to take care of itself. So there was a blend of those three different coaches that I kind of used, that I leaned on my experiences as a player to kind of start my coaching career, and then just coming out freshly. I mean, practice planning, structural. It was a lot that I learned at Lowell at that time. And then over the course of my career for the past 20 years, I never stopped learning, right? And I never want to stop learning. Being able to work with Coach Pearl, and Coach Bork last year, kind of Coach Bork's a new age coach, right? He's fresh out of the development program. He's in his mid 30s, young 30, early 30s. And he's a phenomenal X's and O's coach. And he has a unbelievable way of, presenting it to the team and getting them to understand, why we do certain things, right? We're not like structure in practice. We're creating habits in practice. And then those habits are translatable to our structure in our games, right? So I even lean on those guys the past couple of years of my coaching career. Like I never want to stop learning, because if I stop learning, then what am I going to continue to teach my players, right? Like, because the game is always going to be evolving.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And the habits part of it's such an interesting thing, because if you do have just structure and practice like that, kids can become robotic. And having those
100%.
habits, just know, you don't even think about it. That makes such a big difference. The relationships part of it with Tim Whitehead, first, I completely agree with you. Tim Whitehead, at least in my dealings with him, and I've dealt with him a
Oh,
lot less than you, incredible guy. Um, but it is such an interesting age that
yeah,
you and I have talked about this before, that high school age. It's so funny. Like I can even relate to it with my coaches at Framingham, where it's like,
yeah,
I was never going to go play after that, anywhere serious, but I learned some of my best life lessons from
yeah,
those coaches.
yeah,
Some of them were yelled at me, but that's okay.
yeah,
That's how you learn. And I
yeah,
think that it's such a, when you're a high school coach of any sport, I think you're such uh, um, a huge impact on that kid's life, in terms of
yeah.
their mindset going forward, and the work ethic they're going to have for the rest of their life. And I think it's important, I think, for coaches, and you clearly do, to understand that.
For me, like I love this age. Like I've been asked, "Hey, do you ever want to get into college?" And I think that's kind of like, again, ask me now and where my coaching career is. But this is where I feel most impactful for the development of a hockey player, but more importantly, the human, right? And I tell families all the time when they visit Cushing, like, and we go through the application process with them and all that stuff, the recruiting process. I said, listen, at the end of the day, right, you have to come to this school and you have to love it and you have to envision it. If hockey doesn't work out the exact way that you think it's going to work out, you still have to go to school here. You still got to eat the food. You still got to live in the dorms. You still got to go to the classes. You got to be part of the community, right? The rink at the top of our hill is just one part of your day. And I believe that, right? And if I can really be impactful for a player away from the rink in their life, and then we can just translate that to how they compete and how they're accountable within the rink, that player is going to be a better person, when they leave here, right? And when they get to the Q or the USHL or they get to UNH or, St. Lawrence, whatever it may be, I want them to be able to say, no, like I remember what coach said, right? And I see it and I get it. Right. So that's just something that I just believe in. And that's, I really try to hone my coaching skills around that, about developing relationships. And then the other stuff between the boards will take care of itself because we have good owners, and that will take care of itself.
Was that something that coaches have always had? Like Tim Whitehead, obviously, did it with you in the late '90s, early 2000s, and obviously, there's the whole idea of the old school coach, the yeller, the no
Yeah.
nonsense kind of guy. Have you seen that be a change over the last 25 years of coaches caring more about relationships, or was it happening before then, and we just kind of only hear about the old school guys?
I think it was happening then. I mean, right? Like you go back to some of the greats, John Walsh, right? Like, man, I can't imagine that he wasn't a guy that developed relationships with his players back then. Coach Whitehead, Coach Parker at BU. I mean, all these guys are relationship guys, and they probably, are still staying in touch with their players these days, right? I just think technology in our world has changed that. It's more visible now. You just didn't see it a lot back then, right? Like, and it wasn't talked about a lot back then. So I think it was there. I think, old school to new school to me is just how I think a lot of it is how you're adapting to the new player development, right? In terms of letting kids be a little bit more, um, unstructured at times within their games at times, right? Like letting their skill take over a little bit more, or I should say, let their skill play through the structure, right? So it was probably in those days, more specific. It's like, I want you to play this way, this way, and this way. And now, the new school is allowing us to create habit-based players.
Do you notice higher skill in players today?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do. And I think it's just the evolution of that of an athlete, right? Like these kids are training more, and they're training differently, they're eating differently, their sleep habits are hopefully better than they were back then. Like the resources are bigger, right? Like, like let's go to every Division I college hockey campus now and go through their facilities and look what they have, right? So the recovery rooms, so all of the resources that these players have at their fingertips are allowing them to make progression, I think, with it, right? And then just the training of this on ice skills aspect of it. They're just, it's a faster game right now. There's no question. It's not like, and people, and let me guess the best way to say this is, I'll use, I guess, myself as an example. I think I was a pretty decent hockey player back in the day, right? But I had the resources that I had back then. I think if those players back in the day were going through it now, we would be adaptable to what the players are doing now, right? They're allowed to take advantage of more opportunity and more resources.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you see it in with younger players coming into the NHL now. I think
Yeah,
we see it at the younger levels. Kids are more and more skilled every year. Kids are scoring not that this is fully skilled, but through the legs
yeah,
goals when they're 13,
yeah.
and doing it with confidence. Whereas that maybe wasn't happening,
No,
10 to
it's
15 years ago.
but they're practicing that,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like we didn't practice that stuff. Like, you know what I
You
mean?
weren't
So
hitting the
that's
Michigan.
no, like, so it is just more prevalent in how the game is being played today.
And I always find it. I always kind of roll my eyes when I hear someone be like, "Oh, that's not how hockey's meant to be played. That's not the
Yeah.
game I know and love." And I get it. I imagine when we're older, there will be some new school thing. We'll be like, "That's not hockey." But it's reality. It's a creative game. It's a creative game that has evolved, and it's more entertaining now. I find it. I'd rather watch great skill and fast, high speed players than
Yeah.
not.
I think our game is in a perfect spot. It is fun to watch. It is fast paced. It is creative, and it is still pretty physical. Yes, is there less of the fighting at that higher level? Yeah, there is. And, and does that take away that old school mentality? Like I'm sticking up for my teammate mentality? Yeah, it does. Right. But I love our game right now. I, I just a quick like snapshot of it, like our championship game against Dexter this past March. My sister came down to that game and she hadn't seen like a high school hockey game in quite some time. And she grew up with three brothers that all played college hockey, that played high school hockey, etc. And she walked away and she's like, I can't believe how fast that was. Like, and and it kind of just made me think, I'm like, yeah, like I'm like, it's good hockey, right? Like, and that's obviously translatable for our level, and then just translate it to the college level, and then translate it to professional. It's fast paced right now. It's really good.
I think that's one of the most fun things about the Elite Eight championship, at least the three that I've seen, is how good the game is. Like
Yeah,
all 3 years, I know it didn't work out for you guys the first two times, but just as an
that's
onlooker,
okay.
you won this past year. That's all that matters.
We won.
The speed, the physicality, the intensity of it, like it
Yeah,
is phenomenal. And I agree with you on that point with high school. And I want to ask you about sort of the future of prep and fall hockey. And I think one thing, we're in September. We see it with the fall slate now. You guys play as the Central Mass Penguins. You've been doing that for a bunch of years now,
yep.
playing together in the fall. Some players, I think, for you guys still play with their 15 only teams, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, we have three of our players that are incoming that are playing for their 15 only team this year. Everyone else is playing with the Central Mass Penguins. Two of our players that are, kind of no fall '06 birth years are playing at the 19U level with the River Rats, just so they have, opportunity to, get some games in on the weekends as well. So,
Absolutely. And so I'm curious, like, I did a story on this last week. There's a CEM league with like Connecticut teams that are forming that are doing a
yeah,
similar thing you guys are doing. They're playing each other on the weekends, and you see it with like Peak Performance Prep. They have a whole league, and other teams obviously have
yep,
they play together. Phillips Exeter does with the River Rats team, and there's a bunch. And I don't want to have
yep,
to, because if we name them all, we're going to be here a long time. But
yep.
um, do you see that as the future of fall hockey, or do you see it kind of how it is now, where you have some teams do one things and some teams do another?
I and it's a good question, and it's a question that I don't know if my answer is going to be relative, a year from now, because I don't know. I honestly I don't know where it's going to go. I think I know where I would like to see it go. I mean, I love prep to start October 1st, and we kind of model the college, right? But I know that is a hard thing to obtain today. So it's probably going to be a mixture of teams doing what they're doing now, kind of those Connecticut teams trying to form something down there so they have an opportunity to be able to give their players a development path. Teams like us, Winchendon, Holderness, Dexter doing what we're doing right now. So we can give our players the best opportunity for development and give them a September to a March season, right? But you have to do something, because if you don't offer anything, then you're not gonna be able to sustain a viable program, you know. So I would say for the next couple of years, it's probably gonna stay, as is, a little bit flatlined until someone takes, I think, a leap of faith and is a little bit of a renegade and goes out on their own. I you know, I don't know how many. I don't see it changing. I mean, so, but I'm very thankful for our setup. I mean, we have a great setup for us to be able to practice here, right? 2 times, 3 times a week, and where our kids are able to walk around campus to get to their, to get to where they need to go for their hockey development right now. Like it's huge, right? Like, so I know some schools, they still have to probably drive off campus or they don't get enough ice touches during the week, but they get to play games on the weekend. I mean, we're super fortunate to have the setup that we do for our players, within the Central Mass program. So it is working really good for us right now. As a whole, with the whole landscape of prep, if we can get a little bit more with prep hockey and get it to either start earlier, that would be fantastic. I just don't know if there's going to be the word I used earlier, renegades. I just don't know if there's going to be enough schools that are going to say, hey, I'm going to be one of the first ones to do that. Right. Until you get 3 or 4 to do it, I don't think things are going to change that much in the next couple of years.
I would assume do it, you mean like leave the knapsack, essentially, right? I'm not saying you guys are doing that, but
not
like that
like
would be
the NEPSAC, but work within NEPSAC, right? Like if there's a way to work within NEPSAC, and I haven't had any of these conversations. I'm just in my own mind. Like,
yeah.
well, if we can get it to where we can model a college hockey schedule a little bit, that's what I think we would want, right? And I'm a big multi-sport supporter. Like I want our players to play multi-sports. But with that being said, most of our players play their second sport in the spring, right? So all of our players on campus, of the 70-ish whatever hockey players we have on campus right now, one of them is playing soccer right now, and that's not because I don't want them to play soccer. It's because that's just what they want to do right now, right? So why, if we can accommodate those fall players under the NEPSAC guidelines, I think that's a grand slam for everybody. I don't know if we're going to get there. I need to be more involved in the next couple of years from administrative standpoint. Now that I'm in the position that I'm in, I'm hoping that I can learn a little bit more.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think it's one of those things that there's so many factors at play. Because I agree with you, like it would be awesome to start the prep hockey season in October. Like I'm with you
Yep.
on that. Like and I don't mean to piss people off with that, but it would be fun to have the season start and have it mirror a college schedule. I think it's
Yep.
college preparatory, and I know junior hockey exists now, and you don't go from prep to college. I get that, but I do like that idea, and that idea has grown on me in the last 3 to 4 years. But as we say, there are so many hurdles to that,
So
and here's the reality, right? Like ISL kids are all in the Metro Boston area, and there are lots of great fall hockey options in that area that are not super far to drive, and so I think that's probably their model, and that works for them. I mean, the Junior Eagles, the River Rats, the Militia, the Whalers, there are many other teams. It works for them, and that's great. I think Cushing and your Lakes region teams and your Connecticut teams, and there are lots of great teams down in Connecticut too, Mid Fairfield and the Connecticut Junior Rangers and all those teams. But I think it's the driving distance and those types of things. And I was, when I was reporting out the story on CEM, it's like that is a thing for families. And I get it. You're spending a lot of money on a prep school, and you've got to schlep your kid to Foxborough every
yeah,
weekend. I mean, that's not easy. So I
no,
get that.
it is a very big challenge logistically. And, I think we have the environments right on our campuses to make it easier. And, again, the Central Mass Penguins allows us to do that. Right. So we're in a really good spot because of that. But, hopefully more schools can, think hopefully the way I think. And then, in a few years, if it can change, great. If not, we're still going to be here and we're still going to do what we do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Dan, I think
Yep.
we've covered everything, which means we have one thing left to do, which is with our great producer, David Yaz, and it's doing some overtime.
Overtime.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to Overtime, where I have 3 questions for both of our panelists here. Both Dan and Evan are unprepared for this exercise, so go easy on them, listeners. What we have today are 3 quotes about hockey. I'm going to read them to you, and then you simply react one way or the other, or wherever you want to go with this. Have some fun. Heck, hockey's a fun game, right, guys? All right.
A little bit.
Here we go. Quote number 1 comes to us from Jim Kenney, former Toronto Maple Leafs star. He said, half the game is mental. The other half is being mental. Half the game is mental. The other half is being mental, which poses the question, do you have to be a little bit nuts to play hockey? I've just listened to a very intelligent conversation between you two, but Jim Kenney says you got to be a little mental. Dan, what do you think of that?
You got to play with jam. I mean, if you're not playing with jam and you are not playing on an edge, it's hard to play this game. So I would probably, I don't want to say if you got to be mental, but yeah, you got to play on a jam and you got to play with an edge and you got to play with a little, FU, right? Like you have to.
So I'm an older guy, and I'm not up with the lingo. Playing with jam, I take it you just told us what it meant. A little bit of an edge, a little bit of a nuttiness.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Evan, your thoughts? Are you half mental? Do you
Uh,
require that?
I'm all half mental in different ways, but yeah, I think Dan. I agree with Dan. I also think it's partially controlling that, because there's like, if you go too far, if you're too involved in the playing on the edge, and you start to take penalties or you get away from
Yeah.
structure, things like that, it can hurt your game. So it's the players who can find that perfect balance, that playing on the edge, but also playing their game and gaining an advantage on the other team and things like that. But yes, you do need to have a screw or two loose, and
Yeah.
I think that it certainly helps when that's the case. And you see it, especially now with like guys like Matthew Tkachuk. It's like a lot of kids coming up now are like, I want to be like Matthew Tkachuk, and he kind of has that perfect balance. He has that perfect balance. So
I wonder if you need that a little more for hockey than you would for like football. Like we had the incident week 1 of the NFL where the Eagles player hucked a loogie on Dak Prescott. But with football, the play's over after about 7 seconds. Then you can regroup and rethink and re-strategize. But when you're on the ice in hockey, it's go, 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 right?
yeah.
Evan?
Oh yeah. It's hard.
100%.
All right. Quote number 2 comes to us from Gus Kyle, who was he played for the Rangers and the Bruins between 1949 and 19 something else. I don't have all the. Anyways, Gus Kyle, he was great. We all know Gus. All right, this is a quote about street hockey. Gus said the following: "Street hockey is great for kids. It's energetic, competitive, and skillful, and best of all, it keeps them off the street." I saw that quote and I just fell in love with it instantly. Evan, we'll let you go first on this. The importance of street hockey.
That's such an old timey 1940s quote. He definitely he kind of cooked with it, like street hockey, keep him off the street. I like that. Street hockey. I mean, I know Pat's talked about it before. Like, street hockey got him into hockey. Nothing beat after practice as a youth player, going in, the kid who has the cul-de-sac, taking out the nets, putting the goalie equipment on. Street hockey's the best, and it's easy to do. Like, if you can't skate, it's easy to pick up and play. So yeah, street hockey is, I think, the tough part with hockey is, sports like basketball and football, you can sort of easily play. Hockey, you need ice for. Street hockey, you don't. So street hockey is sort of something that anybody can get involved with and play.
Coach,
Keeps off the street too.
Yeah, it is. It's very cost effective. That is for sure. But I agree. I mean, street hockey to me is like part of my childhood, right? Like, that's exactly what we would do. We'd get home, we, get off the bus, put your bag away and run out, and you're in the streets and you're playing street hockey, right? So I'm going to, say it puts you on the streets in a good way, for sure. But I don't see enough of it out there anymore. I mean, we're definitely too structured in our world today. And I would love to see some of these kids going back to being unstructured, because that's when you're developing creativity, and street hockey allowed you to develop creativity.
That's a great point. You learn. I first played street hockey. I actually was living in Acton at the time on Hillcrest Drive, as I must have been like 8 years old. And that was how I got to know the neighborhood kids. They would let me play, even though I was the youngest kid out there. So absolutely. And now with today's overscheduling and overtraining and practices and this too many leagues, and I think that's maybe why you don't see it as much, which is a shame.
Yep.
All right. Final quote. Oh, by the way, Gus Kyle had a short but apparently memorable NHL career. Was from 1949 to 1952. Played for the Rangers and the Bruins. Okay. He died in 1996. He's missed. Final quote comes to us from Jacques.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. Final quote comes to us from Jacques Plante, who I believe is better known. He was a goalie, a goalie for a long time, 1947, 1975. So, and this is a quote about goaltending. He says, "How would you like a job where every time you make a mistake, a big red light goes on and 18,000 people boo?" So, how would you like a job where every time you make a mistake, a big red light goes on and 18,000 people boo? He didn't even mention the horn. Coach, we'll let you start with that one. The thrills and the perils of being a goalie.
I mean, it's got to be one of the hardest positions to play in all of sports, goalie in any sport, right? Like, because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't type of mentality. When you win, fantastic. The team played great in front of you. If you lose, it's your fault sometimes. And that's kind of the, how you get chastised. But maybe you just don't look at it. If the red light goes on, you're getting booed. It's maybe the red light's going on to just congratulate the other team or something. And you just take that approach, and you just don't let it bother you, because you got to be mentally tough if you're going to be a goaltender. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Jason Tatum goes out and shoots, 15 for 21. He's a star. He's missed 6 times. You missed 6 times as a goalie. You're
Playing.
down in the minors. I mean, it's really perilous. Evan, your thoughts?
I remember in Atlanta with the Thrashers, they had a strobe light, that would go when the Thrashers scored, it would go over the goalie and it would just flash nonstop on them. And I remember thinking, like, that sucks. Like, you just, you're having a bad night and there's like a strobe light that is just blinding you. And it's like, seizure inducing on top of you. So I always thought that was just what an awful thing to have to deal with. I agree. I mean, I can't imagine it. It's funny. I'm in a couple of men's leagues and I always I want to try goalie. I want to give it a shot.
I can't do it.
And last week in a morning game, a puck in warmups went off the crossbar and I was just skating away and it hit me in the side of the helmet. And I was like, this sucks. I'm never doing that ever. Screw that. I'm now playing goalie ever. That just did it for me. That was not pleasant. So yeah, I mean, and coaching goalies too. I think you see it a lot of times. Like, I remember when I was at UMass, Carv was always like, I don't deal with the goalies. I don't handle the goalies. I don't understand it. An assistant who is better with goalies back then, it was Jared Michael. He's the goalie guy. You go talk to him. And there are a lot of coaches who have that mentality because it's I don't know what to do. So it happened.
I take a similar approach. Like, always, if they ask you questions, I'm like, I don't know. Stop the puck. That's my advice. Stop.
See puck. Stop puck.
Stop it. That's it.
On a sort of related note, I went to Penn in Philly, and my junior and senior year, we got, bunch of us got season tickets to the basketball games. And so we weren't exactly the Cameron crazies like Duke, but we had our things. We would needle the opposing players. And if somebody made a turnover, we would stand and point in unison and say, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. And that must be what it feels like to be a goalie when that light goes off. Just got a rough.
Biggest thing is the horn. The horn is the most devastating, I feel like. That sucks.
I know. You feel like crap and then yeah, exactly. Well, you've both done swimmingly well in overtime. Congratulations. I'm going to see if I can get you both a Gus Kyle bobblehead for a prize. I'm not sure they exist, but we'll see. Back to you, Evan, to wrap things up.
Well, this has been fun, Dan. We should have done this on a plane instead. We should have done this conversation on a plane. But Dan, thank you for doing this. And that's RinkWise. We will see you, listeners, at the rinks.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.